Reverse 1999 patch 1.4 is just around the corner. Welcome back to Cocky Gachas, and in this video, I'm going to kickstart the 1.4 series because 1.4 is really a much anticipated patch that brings about new content, and specifically in this video, we're going to touch on the raids, everything about raids. So let's first start with the rewards, and I know a lot of people are actually very interested to know the different ranks of raids brings about what kind of rewards, right? So they want to know what they're missing out on or what they're potentially going to get. So on the screen you can see, right, these are all of the rewards. Although the individual rewards for the specific raid might differ, the general, like the thoughts, the dissonance, as well as the cacophony, all of this will remain the same. So you can see, right, from these rewards you can also tell that the upper echelon, right, the S rank, SS rank, and SSS rank, they don't give that good of a rewards, which is also why, right, a lot of people will say casual players can just aim for A+ rank and they will be fine, because from C to A+, right, this is where the most of the rewards actually congregate in. And also, right, the difference is that A+ only require you to have 360k damage, while this the triple S rank will require you to have 850k, more than 2 times. So really, right, for casual players, do not fret too much about missing out. Of course, the extra thoughts is going to be good for buying duplicates so that you can upgrade your Cyclops further, you can amplify them further to buy the Gluttony, right? But it's not something that you are going to lose sleep over, okay? So this is very important. Next, I'm going to touch on the individual bosses that are present in the 1.4 patch, because the raid bosses actually rotate and new bosses are introduced as the patches go on. But for 1.4, we are going to have 3 raids: Sea Serpent raid, we're going to have the Marsh creation raid, and we have the Cave boss raid. So 3 raids, and in terms of difficulty, I'm going to first cover the Sea Serpent raid, including all of the conditions. So first on your screen, you should be able to see this is the environment conditions for the Sea Serpent raid. This has the translation will be pasted over the Chinese content that you can see on the screen. So the first condition, which is the enemy condition, after unleashing ultimate, gains 3 stacks of tough defense. And what tough defense does is basically gives damage resistance plus 25% when attacked. So this is a stacking thing, so you can actually dispel it with follow-up attacks, which is also why follow-up attacks is highly favored in this raid, on top of the fact that Star Factors units that are good in this raid, 37, it already has this kind of factors that are built in, right? Lilia as a support also has follow-up attacks. Next is going to be ally. The next 2 is going to be ally 1. So Star Factors characters attack plus 20%, reality defense, mental defense, and max HP plus 20%. So this is offensive and defensive. They want you to use Star Afflictors units, and this is on top of the fact that Star Afflictors units will deal extra 30% to the boss itself, because the boss is mineral type. Lastly, one more condition is that after taking 2 actions in 1 turn, you are going to purify all Frostbite from yourself and increases attack by 30%. Frostbite, right, if you have 5 stacks, right, you are going to instantly go into the freeze status, and freeze, you cannot move, and at the end of the turn you're going to take damage. Once we touch on the passive for the boss itself, you're going to see it for yourself. So going into the boss, I'm first going to touch on the passive. First is Piercing Tides. At the end of the duration of any one enemy's freeze, they lose 30% of max HP. So 30% might seem like a little, but later on something is going to amplify it further. I'm going to touch on it as well. Second is going to be Regain Consciousness. At the start of the round, purifies all stats down effects from self. If no damage was taken this round, gain 2 stacks of tough defense. Once again, tough defense is just taking less damage. However, notably, right, like it mentions here, at the start of the round, you purify all stats down, so debuffers are not going to be as popular over here. And Star Afflictors don't really have that many debuffers, except for a popular unit called the 6, and also passively there is 2 Fairy, but 2 Fairy 1 only lasts for 1 round, so it doesn't really affect that much. Okay, so you don't really want to bring in like Beacon or other units. Anyway, they are not going to fare well for this. Next is going to be Resurgent Radiance. I'm also touching this on the highest difficulty, so there is this additional passive. Revives each time lethal damage is taken, remove all statuses and Eureka, and becomes stronger. Destroying the original ally and summoning a new one after entering the final form gains 2 stacks of Reconstruction. So what Reconstruction does, right, it is that Reconstruction gives the boss itself additional damage bonus and damage taken reduction. So this is stackable, and also it only happens when for the final form, right? Final form meaning it changes HP bar from 25k to 50k to 75k, and then lastly 100k. So 100k is the final form. Once it reaches this, it will gain a lot of damage. Usually around S rank, you're going to face this and you'll suddenly face a lot of damage. And also, right, this stacks with freeze damage. So it mentions that you lose 30% of a max HP, but with this Reconstruction buff itself, right, to the boss, you're going to take more than, I would think, 60% max HP if you actually endure through the freeze, right, at the end of the round. So you really don't want to be frozen, you really want to have cleanse, or you really want to use 2 actions to remove the frostbite before you get frozen. Next is Pneuma. Pneuma basically is a common thing among all of the bosses, not affected by Muxi. After using an incantation gains Eureka. So the boss uses Eureka, which also means that Muxi manipulation is not going to be effective. Melania cannot minus Muxi to actually remove the ultimate of the boss. So this is something to take note of. Lastly, Toughened Body. Genesis damage taken plus 75% when other allies die. Deal Genesis damage equal to 15% of your max HP to self. This is max HP of the HP bar that you're currently on. So if on the last bar you're going to take 15k damage because it is 100k health bar. So depending on the health bar, you're going to take how much damage based on killing off the tentacles of the Sea Serpent boss. But of course, also mention, right, Genesis damage is highly favored here since you don't have other sources of damage taken increase for the boss. Okay, very limited sources. You only have attack increase, but that is not going to be good enough. Now next we go on to the skill, and firstly I'm going to touch on the universal ultimate, which is Skanda Shell. So basically all of these raid bosses will have this Skanda Shell. Once they use the ultimate, they will gain 50% of the max HP for the HP bar. So on the last one it is 50k and it lasts for 2 rounds. So it will go into this prepare for ultimate. The good thing is that the boss cannot act during this phase. The shield is active, it will just perform this thing called accumulation. At the start of the round, you gain 1 accumulation. Okay, when the shield is lost, it will suspend this status and then they cannot act for 1 turn. So you can think of it as breaking the shield is very important, because once you break the shield, they cannot act for 1 turn, and also they'll take damage increase for 50% for 1 turn. So this is when you unleash your burst. Very important to take full use of this. Okay, for accumulation, if you really are incapable of breaking the shield and at the start of the round they have 2 accumulations, they will use their respective ultimates. And for Sea Serpent, it's called Sea and Sail. So for Sea and Sail, it is a mass attack and it deals 350% reality damage and inflicts 2 stacks of frostbite. Very sick also, right? 2 plus 2 is 4 already, so almost you are going to go to the stage whereby you're going to get frozen instantly. And also other skills that I've not mentioned also apply frostbite. Okay, so if 5 stacks go to freeze, and you know freeze, it's very sick. Once you go to final health bar, 60% of max HP is 65% or more, right? You're not going to be able to take it. So really important that you don't get frozen, or you try to cleanse yourself out of the frozen state. This is why 6 and 2 fairy are so highly favored. 6 is more reliable given the fact that don't need ultimate and don't need to quit. Okay, next normal skill is going to be Momentary Tilt, and this is a mass attack and deals 150% reality damage to 2 enemies with the highest HP percentage and applies 2 stacks of frostbite. Once again, applying frostbite, highest HP percentage enemies is going to have taken this, so instantly applies those stacks and to 2 enemies, quite sick. Next one is Corrosion Surge. Mass attack again, deals 150% reality damage to 2 enemies, and then also targets afflicted with freeze, right, will take additional 100% reality damage. So you really don't want to be frozen, like I mentioned. This is for the boss itself. Next we move on to the Tentacles. Tentacles also very important because like just now the skill actually mentions, right, if you kill off the tentacles instantly at the last bar, deal 15k damage. That is pretty significant. Okay, so definitely helps in breaking the shield, also definitely helps in you getting higher score. So especially at the later parts whereby the damage reduction is so high that 15k is really quite significant. However, the tentacles, if you leave them alive, they are still also going to do something, which is first Touch of Abyss. At the end of the round, they are going to use the incantation, which is Touch of Abyss, and what it does is it deals 200% reality damage to the enemy with the highest HP, and also grants their ally tough defense. Everything is about tough defense, right? So at the end of the round, it's going to apply this defensive layer, and also it's going to deal damage. So quite annoying, the tentacles. Try to kill it off every single time, so that although you constantly respawn, right, but you constantly do more damage to the main body, and also you prevent them from accumulating Muxi. And that is when they're going to use the ultimate, which is called Breath of Terrifying Whips. And what this does is instantly apply to the highest HP unit, right? Freeze. Instantly. Okay, no frostbite stack, instantly freeze. So you really don't want this to happen, especially since there are 2 tentacles. So there is a high chance that you might get frozen, and you really want to be prepared for it to cleanse it off once this is being applied. Or you want to have units like Melania to minus off the Muxi control, so that they cannot do this ultimate Otherwise, you have to kill it before they have 4 Muxi, because this right actually applies when they have 4 Muxi, because at the end of the round, if the caster have 4 Muxi, it's going to consume 4 Muxi to use the ultimate straight. Okay, so instead of 5 Muxi, it's 4 Muxi. Very, very scary. This is the Sea Serpent raid. Now moving on, next we're going to have the Marsh creation raid, which I personally deem to be the second most difficult one after Sea Serpent. And for the conditions itself, first, it is when attacking an enemy that is not in shield or counter, meaning if you're not in shield or counter, the boss is going to do 20% extra damage dealt to you. So you really want to be in shield or counter, but honestly, sometimes you can't help it. Just try to out-sustain it if you don't have those units that provide you with shield or counter. Next, for the positive conditions, for your allies, after using a 2 rank or 3 rank buff, which is a 2-star, 3-star, buff card, counter card, healing incantation card, instantly dispel the stats up and positive status from the boss. So very important. Later on, you're also going to see why this is so important, because the damage dealt as well as the damage taken, all of this scales with the number of buffs that the boss have on them. Okay, next is also when attacking enemies not in counter status, you're going to do additional 40%. So this also plays into the skill that I'm going to mention later for the boss. You really want to time your attacks very, very well. Lastly, Mineral and Beast Afflictors characters attack plus 20%, reality defense, mental defense, and HP plus 20%. So you can notice here, right, instead of the first one, Sea Serpent, is only 1 Afflictors. This has 2 Afflictors, including Beast. However, the boss itself, Marsh creation, is a Beast type. Hence, even if you use a beast type, right, although you will benefit from this ally condition, you will not benefit from additional 30% of the afflicted damage bonus. Okay, so this is something to note. Next, we go on to the passive for the Marsh creation. First is Swarm Erosion. At the start of every 2 rounds, enter counter for 1 round. So every even round, it is going to use this counter, right? But you can time your attack like I mentioned, right? Use the turns whereby they have counter, the boss have counter, to fuse your card so that you have the dispel ready. Next turn, right, when they don't have counter, you're going to do additional 40%, and then you dispel away the buffs. It's going to come together. That's when you want to time your attacks, use your ultimates, do the burst. So this is very important. If you don't just go blindly, right, you might not be able to deal as much damage as you really want to. Okay, next is going to be Fertile Waste. At the end of the round, gain 1 random effect from the collection of buffs, similar to the 6 collection of buffs, right? It is going to gain it for 2 rounds, and then when attacking for every type of stats up, positive status or counter status, right, it's going to gain additional damage dealt, which is why you really want to dispel using rank 2, which is why you want to fuse cards. It's a very closely connected loop, right? If you don't dispel, you're going to take more damage, and also you're going to deal less damage, and the collection of buffs are all pretty useful. Penetration rate plus 20%, incantation might plus 15%, mental defense or reality defense plus 15%. So all of these are useful buffs for the boss. You really don't want them to have it on them at all times and also deal more damage. Okay, so this is Fertile Waste. Next is Pneuma, same thing, right? Not affected by Muxi. After using an incantation, gains Eureka plus 1. And lastly, also Resurgent Radiance, whereby it is going to revive each time, not going to repeat, yada yada. It just means that you're going to stack more and more damage reduction. So this is why really having increased sources of damage dealt is going to be able to compensate for damage reduction taken. Now moving on to the skills, same thing for the ultimate. Firstly, the ultimate Skandar Shell. So I'm not going to explain it again. Skandar Shell is the same thing. Try to deactivate the shield, otherwise it's going to use the ultimate. But the ultimate this time is different. So the ultimate this time is Strip Whispers. Okay, what does Strip Whispers do? Dispel all of your stats up, your positive status, your counter status, and also it will do damage to you and derank your cards. If you have all rank 1 cards, no problem. But if you have like a rank 2 incantation or rank 3 incantation, it will downgrade by 1 rank. Okay, so this is the ultimate. Moving to the normal skill, Distorted Vision. So what Distorted Vision does is damage and also additional damage if you do not have any of the stats up, you do not have positive status, counter, or shield. So this boss really revolves around you getting as much buffs on you as possible and dispelling all the buffs on the enemy on Marsh creation. Okay, lastly, Collapse of Consciousness. This one is a damage and also has a defensive factor, because once the boss uses this, they will enter Stronghold. What Stronghold does is that it will give 3 turns of buff, and when you attack them with reality damage, right, their damage taken reduction is going to kick in. It's going to take 25% less damage. And if it's already in Stronghold, meaning 3 turns, right? On second turn, they use the same attack, Collapse of Consciousness. This time around, it's going to get Contempt. Contempt is the mental counterpart for the Stronghold, meaning if you attack with mental damage, it's going to take damage taken by reduction by 25%. So you really want to dispel away all this nonsense from the boss. Really, just about dispelling, just about giving yourself as much wealth as possible, and you should be able to secure your triple S. Lastly, we have the Go in the Cave, which is the cave boss. Okay, for the conditions, we have the enemy first one. At the end of the round, apply 1 stack of Innovate to all enemies. What Innovate does is it's a debuff on your allies, of course, to get them to minus incantation might by 10% per stack is stackable, but it gets removed after you cast the ultimate, which is also why this whole raid is focused around ultimate as well, because the second condition, after using ultimate, right, it will increase all of your allies damage dealt by 30% for 1 round. This is very important because first one, you want to remove the Innovate, and also secondly, you want to increase your damage dealt so that you can compensate for the damage reduction that you get as the HP bar goes on, as they get more and more reconstruction stacks from reviving. Okay, and then it will restore 10% of your max HP for the ally with the lowest HP percentage. So just using ultimate is going to solve a lot of your problems. This whole raid is about using ultimates. Next condition, at the end of the round, if any one enemy is in control or they have 2 stats down or negative status effects, you are going to gain 1 Muxi, and also you will increase the damage heal by 20% for 2 rounds. So this is your sustain, and this is also why debuffing the enemies is important, and also why 6 is so good in this raid. Now moving on to the passives, first one, Sacrificial Wounds. When the boss is not in stats down or negative status, damage dealt plus 15% when affected by 3 or fewer. So you need 4 stats down or negative status to actually not give the penetration rate plus 15% to the boss. So you want as much debuffs on the boss as possible. 6 comes to mind, Beacon Bloom, you have the Shaman, all of these are good debuffers. Next passive, Falsehood. Before attacked by an ultimate, it loses Havoc, Malevolence, as well as Obstinate. So what does this 3 buff do? Havoc will give penetration rate plus 5%, Malevolence will give damage bonus plus 5%, Obstinate will give damage taken reduction plus 5%. The boss gains all of this buff using the normal skills, okay? Additionally, when attacked with an ultimate, take 30% increased damage. So like I mentioned, ultimate very important in this raid. Moving on, next one, passive is going to be the Resurgence Radiance. You have seen this already, just revive, getting more stacks, reconstruction, nonsense, yada yada. Okay, same for all of the bosses. Now, lastly, we have Pinuma, same as well, not affected by Muxi, also uses Eureka. So this is going to be all of the cave bosses passive. Now moving on to the skills, same thing, ultimate, first is Ganda Shell, okay, same thing one. So it's the shield, also it's going to prepare for ultimate, yada yada, same thing, not going to repeat myself, but the skill this time is different. Whipping in Sacrifice, basically it's a mass attack that dispels all of your stats up and also purifies all of the stats down from themselves and deal mental damage to all of the enemies and apply Disarm plus Seal. This is quite sick because Seal, right, doesn't allow you to use the ultimate, and ultimate is super key in this raid, so you don't want the boss to have accumulation. As always, if you don't want that to happen, break the freaking shield and you should be fine, right? 2 turns to break 50k shield should be okay. I don't think it's going to be the biggest problem if you focus on bursting down the boss when they start the ultimate channeling. Okay, next skill is going to be Sublime Punishment. So one target attack deals 200% mental damage to the enemy with the highest attack and applies Disarm for 1 round. If any of the casters Havoc, Malevolence or Obstinate statuses reaches 5 stack, it is going to extend the target's Disarm by 1 round. So more Disarm if it has those Havoc, Malevolence or Obstinate status at 5 stacks. And also this is going to apply basic Disarm. So Disarm means that you cannot use attack incantations, which means if they disarm you when it's preparing to use the Skanda Shell, you are going to have a bad time. So yeah, just problematic in general, trying to prevent you from attacking and breaking the shield so that they can seal you and you're going to be in a loop of trouble. Okay, lastly, Joyful Lashings. Mass attack deals 150% mental damage to 2 enemies with the highest HP and also gain 2 stacks of Havoc. Like I mentioned just now, Havoc means penetration rate plus 5%. After attacking, if the caster has 3 or fewer kinds of stats down, negative stats, gain additional 2 stacks. So you, like I mentioned, always want debuff on him so that he don't gain additional stacks of Havoc. So you might be wondering where the Obstinate as well as the Malevolence came from, and that is because he also have 2 little lackeys. lackeys. Okay, the 2 little lackeys. The first one is going to have the skill whereby at the end of the turn, it's going to cast Rapturous Applause, and what this does is basically just grants malevolence to another ally with the highest attack, which is the main body. Okay, and then at the end of the round, if they have 3 Muxi enough, they are going to use Ultimate Overture Dark Show. So what this does is it will apply Nasty Wound, meaning you're going to heal less, and also grants 3 stacks of malevolence to all of the allies. So this is where the malevolence come from. Next lackey, what this lackey does is of course going to deal with Obstinate, right? So at the end of the round, it's going to use this Trembling Fingertips, and what this does is it's going to deal 200% mental damage to enemy with highest HP, but also grant Obstinate to another ally with highest attack, which is the boss. Okay, same thing here. It is going to use the ultimate if they have 3 Muxi at the end of the round, and it's a mass attack that's going to do mental damage to all the enemies, causing the enemy with the highest attack to deal 30% decreased damage for 3 rounds. This is a quite sick debuff. 30% damage decrease is nothing to be scoffed at, and also it grants 3 stacks of Obstinate to all the allies. Like I mentioned, Obstinate is damage taken reduction to all allies, 3 stacks, quite sick. So yeah, this is where all of the buffs of the boss actually come from, and this is the cave boss. And that about does it for this comprehensive preview for raids, right? Hopefully it will really prepare you guys well for things to come. I'll also be making a raid tier list for each and every single raid so that it can further benefit you guys on top of the information of the skills for the boss. Lastly, if you are interested in 1.4 because it's a big patch, you want to know my opinion on the units, definitely check out this video on the 1.4 tier list that I made the other day. I'll see you guys over there. This is Cocky Gachas, signing off.